Uh, Booyah. So, all right. There's no need to. Well, I think I understand this. In the context of maybe heritability, because if you say there's a blueprint that like supposes what things should ideally be, then heritability shouldn't make sense, especially when one inherits, let's say, uh, um, a bendy spine. I don't know. That sounds rude. But let's say someone inherits a spine that is not so optimal, uh, or inherits a genetic condition or genetic mutation that causes them to not have eyes. I want to specifically focus on heritability. So it would make sense for there to be this root capacity. Um, when someone's genes uh, can have um, things like traits where if you inherit, yeah, so the blueprint suppose what things should be ideally, but if someone has, let's say, the father or mother has, let's say, a bendy spine, this bendy spine is heritable, so so the kid's gonna get it, their offspring, and this kid now has this bendy spine, then it wouldn't make sense for this root capacity because what is this root capacity? Like it would just be changing depending on the genes. But it's like saying, so we're just gonna say the mother has a root capacity for, let's say, a straight spine mechanism, bio mechanic mechanisms, biomechanisms, and what you call it, chemical or pathway. These stuff just sound like they don't really confer any definition, meaning, or anything to me. I wish they gave an example whereby let's say X and Y, X is affected, X is this, X has this genetic condition, and Y has not, does not have this genetic condition, does not preclude them from this or that. Therefore, what differentiate X from Y? Agent X has this, and Agent Y has this. Agent Y has this because Agent Y did this. Blah blah blah. That would be much more understandable because this is a bit vague. But it's not vague to anyone. But it's not vague to anyone who wants to know biology, so it's fine. There's no need to posit root capacity to explain these biological facts. So Shao's appeal to root capacities does not appear to be clearly ad hoc. Beyond this, there is a further problem that Shao appeals to root capacities involving to commit severe biologically suspect views. First and foremost, involve a traditional form of species essentialism. I've heard about species essentialism, but I have no idea how to use that in an argument. I'd have to look way more into the subject. All I know is that Darwin and most of the scientific community don't believe in species essentialism. So the burden of proof would be on the essentialist, species essentialist. But again, I have no idea beyond like just astrology. It can't be that bad. Astrology and alchemy as no more compatible with evolution than geocentrism. I don't know what that is with modern astronomy. I don't know what do I know what astronomy is. But now, to be sure, few philosophers have recently challenged this orthodoxy, as Shaw points out. Well, we did not undertake that to evaluate their argument here. That would take us too far afield. Our point is simply that shallow defense of factory farming hinges on a commitment to traditional biological essence that is widely rejected by relevant experts. In order for that defense to succeed, the burden of proof falls on him to show how that biological essentialism is not problematic after all. Second, Shao claims that all and all and only humans have rational nature, in virtue of which they belong to a moral community, appears to presuppose that taxonomic. You know what? I'm gonna look this up. I'm gonna look this up. I'm tired of these words. Taxonomic, concern with the classification of things. Taxonomy is in a broad sense, scientific classification, but more strictly the classification of living and extinct organisms, i.e., biological classification. The the taxonomy study of defining circumstances. Taxonomy is a branch of biology that classifies things into 8 ranks of domain. Okay. Taxonomic categories, such as human or precisely the genus Homo, are objectively real, but these seem doubtful. There's a good reason to believe that taxonomic categories are nothing more than mental constructions introduced by us for the purpose of conveniently describing the world. What? One indication of this, um, we all evolve gradually, by gradual and almost continuous transition, do not fall into a naturally distinct groove. Oh, okay. As Ridley in 2004, page 52 to page 53 puts, the idea that nature comes in distinct groups with no variation between is a naive perception. If full range of nature form in time and space is studied, all apparent boundaries become fluid. What? No variation between space, naive perception. If full range of natural forms in time and space is studied, all the apparent boundaries. Oh, okay. So, like, I assume this just means an essentialist think this. So X, Y, I don't know, M. This is gonna be, let's say, humans, and they're in their own distinct category. But basically, I messed this up so bad. Let me just remove this. It's gonna be humans, or at least Homo sapien. I'm gonna just put Homo with an S. 'Cause this taking a long time to write. So Homo sapiens are a distinct category from uh so these points are vague and it points to the subjective nature of taxonomic categories. In this report, categories. In this report, biological taxa are like time zones which do not exist in nature but are artificial constructions. Of course, if this is true, time zones capture something real. Nobody denies that the sun rises and sets at different times, at different longitudes, but this does not mean that time zones are real, much less that each of them have an essence. There is a continuous variation upon which we impose our discrete category. Time zones are constructions of our brain superimposed on a continuous variation in nature. One could argue that continuous variation is not always the case among individual organisms, as we can stress that evolution has to be gradual, specific characteristics evolve in small steps. Of course, the rate of evolution can vary greatly, and some rather large jumps of trait cannot be considered impossible. However, the overnight emergence of a new taxa with a number of new characteristics is highly unlikely, not likable. And for genera, come on, these terms are crazy. It can be ruled out completely. The set of features we see as human today, which would probably be called human nature by Shao, appeared at different times during evolution of our ancestors. The term might not to be used. In light of evolution, taxa seems quite similar to time zones. They reflect an attempt to describe nature, but they do not exist in reality. Finally, Shao view presupposes that biological organisms in possession of what he calls a rational nature happen to precisely those which beings belong to certain taxonomic categories. Okay. In other words, he assumes that essence and taxa coincide, and in particular, that capacity to reason are correlated to membership in genus Homo. But this is at least doubtful. One thing, it would be rather difficult to show that no animal except humans can reason in the sense required for being moral. We know that great deal about animals, including a good bit about what they probably feel, but this is doubtful. For one thing, it would be rather difficult to show that no animal except humans can reason in the sense required for being moral. We know a great deal about animals, including a lot bit about what they probably feel, but how and what we think is about yet mostly inaccessible for us. I wonder whether extraterrestrial scientists studying human behavior would able to recognize that humans do have the capacity to reason in moral matters, and if so, would they not conclude that chimpanzees also have this capacity? We know for sure dolphins and other cetarians, my God, I I gotta search this up. Whales, dolphins, porpoises. Give me the pronunciation. Cetacean. 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 I got it right. Oh my god. Okay. H. Habilis. Habilis. Habilis? 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 What? Habilis? I'm gonna search it up. Hey yo, what the? Yo, I need the pronunciation. Oh, see. Habilis, 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 Homo habilis, habilis. Okay, habilis. I got it. Homo erectus or Homo habilis possessed the level of rationality necessary for moral reasoning. Perhaps some of them were able to distinguish between moral good and bad acts. Others may have lacked this ability. Indeed, it's entirely possible the clear cut member of Homo arrived on the scene before any individual developed the capacity for such reasoning. Conversely, the capacity for reason, moral reason, may well have appeared before any individual who were clearly humans. For Shaw to be right that all and only humans are rational nature, it seems that the appearance of rationality would have to coincide precisely with the appearance of humans, members of the Homo, which would be nothing short of a miracle. In short, shall appeal through capacities or essence and respond to problems of marginal. Conclusion. Shao attempts to defend factory farming by arguing that it's not inherently cruel. His conclusion is true, but insignificant, for factory farming is still cruel under the circumstances in which it presently takes place. Since our nutritional needs can generally be met apart from meat or animal production, or products, subjecting animals to such treatment is not morally justified and thus requires a callous indifference towards the great suffering inflicted on them by this industry. But but that makes factory farming cruel in the brutal sense of the term. Furthermore, even apart from the considerations of cruelty, factory thus insofar as factory farming causes animals to suffer without a sufficient. Moreover, he fails to offer a plausible response to the problem of marginal cases. In particular, his appeal to root capacities is unacceptably ad hoc and saddles him with a number of biological dubious views. In the end, we should believe Shao would do well to abandon this anthropocentric approach to morality and instead embrace a more plausible view that suffering of all sentient beings morally and thus that it is unnecessary view that suffering of all sentient beings matters morally, and thus that the unnecessary suffering caused by factory farming makes it immoral, even cruel. Give it a round of applause. That was a fun article. I think I should graph it. There's some important information, especially about the gradual thing, time zones. That's pretty good. This is a good article. I like I like this part, but I wish they didn't went like, give an example. But the blind guy with humans develop eyes to begin with. The very visual develop eyes, not one rule, cross direct to human life without appealing to capacities. Da, da, da. Yeah, yeah. This doesn't really make sense. This part doesn't make sense at all. This is not a critique of the article. It's more so on the Shao guy because he said blueprints dictate how biological processes develop. But like I said over here, if this blueprint is contingent very much on the genes being like conferred person to person and biochemical mechanism, whatever it is. So this blueprint is just genes, like with makeup on. It's just genes, and genes can. If you don't have the genes for something, you're precluded from the thing. Uh, So by making up something called root capacities, when root capacities are literally it'll like be like it would just be like it's just feel completely made up. Like it doesn't make sense. Like they're saying it's an ad hoc. It's information specifically made up to justify why factory farming is good or why we should not if we honor these views. You have to you have to get they'd have to say someone with a pre-genetic disposition towards being precluded from the disposition of rationality would then be removed from the moral community, and then you'd like that one paper. I didn't really read it fully. At least I didn't. All right, there's another article. This one seems more fun. Well, no, both of them are fun. And what am I talking about? So it's gonna be abortion, infanticide, choosing parenthood. I think this is a newer argument. I haven't heard of it, and a Canadian wrote it, so it's gotta be good, probably. Abstract some of the analogies between abortion and infanticide appeal to Jarvis Thompson because construct permissibility of infants. However, an argument on the grounds of a right to choose to become a parent can maintain that abortion is permissible, but infanticide is not recognized in the normative significance and nature of parenthood. I have no idea what that means. I think about it. An argument on the grounds of right to choose to become a parent can maintain that abortion is permissible, but infanticide is not recognized by the normative significance and nature of parenthood. Wait, can't someone just say it? Like, someone can't you just say that parent who's of the X infant X of X says they no longer want to be a parent? Couldn't you just say this? And under these guys, the parent can commit infanticide. I don't know. I don't even know why he put this in French. I'm assuming it's French. I'm gonna look it up. I'm way too embarrassed not for it to be French. I mean, he's Canadian. Oh, come on. Yeah, this is so French. I'm just gonna go with no. I can't. Yeah, I'm just gonna go with that's French. Yeah, it gotta be French. Something like that. Okay. Introduction. Are abortion and infanticide morally analogous? Some argue so. For example, Michael Tooley, 1972, argues both abortion and infanticide are morally permissible because neither the fetus nor newborn satisfy the conditions required for a serious right to life. Jeff McCann, 2007, argues that there is no intrinsic difference between viable fetuses and premature infants. I don't know about Michael Tooley. Never read anything on him. I think Jeff McCann. I looked into some of his work, and not seriously, but I think he says the death of a newborn and the death of let's say a fetus are basically the same because something like they're both they've never experienced anything. Something like there's no difference between the existence of a newborn, the death of a newborn, and the non-existence of fetus, something like that, because they never had any experiences, etc., etc. I guess I'm butchering this guy's argument. I hope he doesn't come out to find me. Argues that there's no intrinsic difference between fetus, viable, are morally impermissible. David, so because infanticide is wrong, abortion must be too. The argues that abortion is morally permissible. Then what they call afterbirth abortion, the act of a pure and committed infanticide. What the afterbirth abortion? As is an abortion like meant to be expelling this from your body or okay? The act of parent committing infanticide on their newborn for the typical reasons of a pregnant woman or person may have an abortion should also be morally permissible for the same reason that would justify abortion because fetus and newborn are morally equivalent. I don't agree. I just don't agree. This doesn't even make sense. I mean, the responsibility of a infant can be transferred onto another caregiver. This doesn't make sense. There's a clear difference. Those who accept that fetuses and newborns are morally equivalent take that there is no relevant similarity between them, such as a lack of rational capacity, a lack of first person experience. Hey, they brought up rational capacity. We were talking about that a while ago. A lack of self consciousness, a lack of. Yeah, they only become self conscious after like 2 to 4 years, something crazy like that. A lack of chain of memories, a lack of autonomy, a lack of a capacity for higher order thinking, a lack of capacity for moral responsibility, a lack of capacity for determination. Okay. Because fetus and the newborn are so similar in ways relevant to moral standing, they have equal moral status. From this supposed equivalency in moral status, it is reason that are no morally relevant differences. God, no morally relevant differences between the situation of a pregnant person having an abortion and a parent committing an infanticide to their. I just still don't agree. I don't know. They didn't bring up. Okay. Well, they do have a lot of similarities. I'm gonna give them that. There's a challenge to explain how one can accept the permissibility of a parent committing an infanticide or deny, given the apparent lack of moral relevance between. I'm gonna speed read through this analogy between parents having an abortion. Uh, Okay. One way of addressing this challenge is to build Judith Jarvis. Uh, Oh, permissibility of infanticide uh, specifically infanticide via deprivation. I think I've heard this argument before. I can't remember the guy's name, but it goes something like I'm not gonna write it down. Basically, I'm just gonna write this as a placemaker. X, let's say Sally. Oh, the Sally cabinet. Sally in the cabin. So there's this pregnant woman. She's about to give birth. There's enough food in the cabin for the newborn and herself, but they find her um with a dead infant or newborn, but all the baby formula was still there. So she chose not to give the newborn any baby formula, whatever it is. So she deprived it of the nutrition it needed, and it died. Um, and there's another variation whereby let's assume that this woman has an infant newborn, and this infant or newborn all it needs to survive is breast milk. Is the woman morally obligated to give over the breast milk under the guise of bodily autonomy, or Julius Tomlinson's example? She is morally obliged. She has the choice not to give over her bodily resources. But I think this cabin thing has been disproved quite a bit. Sally Cabin. I don't. Oh God, I have no idea. I can't find it, but I see something that really similar to it. but it has misogynistic. I've never seen this before. I'm scared to click it. No. Oh, what is this? Okay. Let me zoom in. Can't see this. I got you with the screen move. The cabin in the woods scenario is misogynistic. The cabin in the woods scenario is used in conjunction with advocating for why women must endure pregnancy. There are some issues with it. The scenario makes pregnancy. Wait. Oh yeah, the reason why this cabin scenario got like it wasn't really equivalent equivalence, but bias non secular was because it wasn't as substantially burdensome as a pregnancy. So yeah. So in David Boonin's argument, he makes sure to specify that pregnancy, blood transplant, marrow transplant, these are burdensome on the person, at least substantially or reasonably so. Therefore, that person has a right to refuse it. But let's say you are drowning, and all the person has to do is throw over a floaty or a lifesaver, whatever it is. Then I think he said it's reasonable. They expected that this person has to do this or be a good Samaritan. So I guess they're gonna bring this up, but it looks interesting. This scenario makes pregnancy as untaxing on the human body as breastfeeding. This misrepresents pregnancy, trivializing pregnancy to some as simple as feeding a baby, something that any human can provide for them. Missing the mark. Pregnancy is so trivial that it is comparable to feeding a baby, something any human can provide for them because babies are for another human. But this is extra responsibility. Doesn't mean extra rights for the pregnant person. In fact, it justifies less right. Pregnancy is like breastfeeding to advocate for abortion bans, but it's not like breastfeeding in order to reject abortion rights. But it is like breastfeeding to trivialize that what mothers endure must. But it doesn't. But it isn't like breastfeeding to evaluate that what a comparison that's going around in circles that the part of the support for pro-life inclusion are invaluable. The part doesn't reject. Okay, I agree. Take the requirement of breastfeeding and pregnancy. Let's call for absence of what is children are entitled in their mother's bodies. That's wild, bro. I don't even think anyone supports this on a broader scale. 'Cause no, a mother can refuse to give her like liver, kidney, or something, if even if the child's gonna die. And you know, I have a crazy, I have a crazy, like there's a crazy hypothetical, hypothetical made by Stephen Kesher. In his book, Does a Pro-Life Position Make Sense? I think he talked more about it, the variation of the quote unquote fat man. Bro, I don't know. I use that word, but I'll find it. Give me a moment. Okay. Yeah, it's not showing up. Maybe I can use this AI. Oh, there you go. Ignore all this, whatever this is. I'll zoom in. I don't know what that is. All right, so this is a part. I had some variations. Um, because they said the kid has a natural right to the mother body, whatever it is. You can ignore the latter part. I got that from a guy in another place, but this specific part on I'm okay. Fat man also smell it because he rarely bathed, is dying. I think this is just for emotional appeal, okay? Is dying. The only way for him to save him is for him to gain antibodies via rigorous anal sex. I can't say that. Okay. With someone with, someone with the right blood type via some science fiction based reason, given the remote location of the I don't like saying the word fat. The fat man, his mother and a few others, given that only his mother has the right blood type, she has to decide whether to save the fat man by permitting him, or heavyset man, or permitting him to enter her. The anal sex will have the same amount of discomfort as that of a woman who experience. experience being denied an abortion. Okay, so I think this example shows like really well how stupid the person has a child has a bodily right to whatever. Yeah, it gets absurd. But like breastfeeding, the take requirements. In addition, say children are entitled to to their mother's bodies. You can look back at what I just said about the fat man who needs antibodies for some weird scientific fictional reason. Blah, blah. So they are entitled to her breasts once they're born. They're entitled to her uterus when they're conceived, and they're entitled to denying a part of her humanity that is sexually before they even exist. All around, she is treated as property of her child. Um, then she can't refuse to give it. So the gestated fetus is he has a right towards the milk, breast milk, and let's say breast milk, and then you can just substitute breast milk for another bodily resource, let's say blood, even mucus, and apply that same science fiction based reason and say let's just say there's antibodies inside the mucus. Or the baby needs some or the baby at the front of the door just needs some blood transfusions or something of the sort. And all the woman has to do is give them a drop of her mucus, right? Or some blood transfusions for a day, whatever it is. And you just switch around the cabin and you say, what if there's a woman who has two infants show up at her front door? This is in the cabins of an remote, it's in a remote area in a cabin. There's no cell phone, there's no baby formula. You really need this to survive. And you just ask the pro lifer, okay, can the woman give over her because remember, and we're stipulating that within their own argument that the breast milk and the womb are made specifically for the child, can with now we substitute for blood or something. They would say, can the woman refuse to give these children blood and anti mucus, right? Antibody mucus, not anti mucus. And he just said yes. I find that a bit funny. So they just lose the argument immediately. But they didn't just say the body of a woman is just the property of the child. But again, this doesn't really make sense because you have tactical consent, as spoken about by David Bowman. Like someone, a sperm donor shouldn't be forced to pay child support for uh, every single offspring that's produced by their sperm. That wouldn't make much sense and it'd be unfair. So, like, we can imagine, let's say a father goes into a. I think Stefan also talked about this. So we can imagine a father goes into a car crash. Uh, let's say it's a car crash. He knew the risk of going inside his car because there's a chance of crashing. He crashes into, let's say, a pedestrian. The pedestrian might need, let's say, a kidney or whatever it is. The father is the only compatible donor. Should the father have a moral obligation to give over his kidney? Somebody will just say that's a stranger. He has no moral obligation towards a stranger. But we can just stipulate that maybe the father uh, gave away his sperm let's say 10, 20 years ago, and it so happened that the pedestrian he hit was was the offspring was one of his offspring. Then does he have a causal connection or causal responsibility to give over his kidney? And I still think that would be ridiculous. So none of these examples really work out in a conversation unless they scapegoat to every single part of the body. If they say that, you can just bring up the part with child support, all that stuff. And these scenarios can examine without context. If we are to constantly talk about the context in which innocent babies was created and need ordinary care or pregnancy for its mother to the point of exhaustion, then I would expect some consideration be given to the cabin in the woods scenario from the pro-life community that utilizes it. You do not get to just toss it down the I think a conclusion that this is one long post, man. Oh my god, this is a long post. Yep, my mic was muted. Kill me. Oh my god. I need a break. My mic was muted for a whole almost an hour. That is sad. God. Okay, that is disappointing. A bit soul breaking. I'll continue until I'm bored. Okay. Dang. Okay. What I'm gonna do. Oh my god. Okay. If Jones had found and fastened on a certain code, which had need to kept him from freezing, but which Smith also needs to keep warm from freezing, then it is not impartiality that to say I choose between you when why Smith also needs to keep him from freezing, then it is not Smith also needs to keep him from freezing, then it is not impartially to say uh well I've never been. Oh my god. Mike was muted. That's insane. Russia. Okay, I can choose between you when Smith owns the code. Women have said again and again, this is my body, my body. Then have reasons to feel angry, reasons to feel that it has been like shouting into the wind. Smith, after all, he's hardly likely to bless you if we just say to him, of course it's your code. Anyways, would grant that it is. But no one may choose between you and Jones who is to have it. Uh, for Thompson, third parties who claim that they may not perform an abortion because they cannot choose between a fetus and a pregnant person mistakenly take themselves to be impartial. We can choose between Jones and Smith in the Cook case because the crucial difference is the two is that Jones Smith owns the code. In other words, the code is Smith's property. The sort of claim Smith has over his code or a homeowner has over his house is a property claim because person's code or house is their property. Thompson immediately compares Smith's claim to his code to a woman's claim to her body. There's strongly suggest that Thompson take ownership of material property codes houses to be analogous to of one's body. This strongly suggests that Thompson treats people's bodies as their own properties because of this. The short claim that people have over their bodies should be understood as property claims because a person body is their property. The right to bodily autonomy is best understood as a kind of property right. Importantly, as Kirsten Hine 2021 argues, a pregnant person's right to bodily autonomy includes not only the authority over continued occupation, but also the authority over going through childbirth. Include the authority to over going through childbirth, uh, through induced birth or C-section because both procedures make use of one's body in a significant way. As Clark Pickard notes, going through pregnancy and childbirth delivery, given that it constantly takes your body is pretty more about induce the right to this. Yes. Oh, why have no longer pursue? Why have you no longer pursue? Consider example of trespasser in a person's home. The homeowner has the authority over their home. This authority is not over the trespasser themselves, but over one's home, include the authority to decide who is welcome in it. The homeowner has the authority to remove the trespasser, but has no authority over them once they have left. Similarly, the pregnant woman does not have the authority over the fetus itself, but does have the authority over their own body, and this includes authority over whether their body continues to be occupied. Both Mary and Warren Buster contend that Thompson violinist doctrine is only analogous to cases of pregnancies that arise unintentionally, such as accidental pregnancies, despite the use of contraceptives due to rape. Rather, the pregnancy due to consensual is. However, oh brother.